Hello, good morning. It is 7:34 a.m. I wonder if we ever managed to do exactly at 7:30 those live streams. And we're here as usual with Stephen and David discussing what is going on in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, this time politics, this week. So we spoke about a range of topics from buses. I mean, usually it is buses, but we spoke about other things as well in the past. But today we're going to speak about some of the news from central government about closing around 50 asylum hotels across the UK, and what does that mean locally, and which are the areas affected locally. But we thought to contextualize this in this question, what actually happened in Peterborough this week, because of course on Wednesday, was it on Wednesday? Yeah, on Wednesday evening, on the 1st of November, Peterborough City Council has had its full council, and there were some very interesting developments there. So, Stephen, what happened in Peterborough? Have you followed the meeting live on Wednesday, like some of our colleagues did? I
I
have.
I followed some of it live. I was at ONS HTC on Wednesday, so I was presenting. There was 5 people watching the live stream of my presentation, and I think over 1,400 watching the Peterborough proceedings, which is unheard of, I think, for local council meetings, and very good that people take an interest in democracy. But basically, there was a motion of no confidence in the leader of Peterborough City Council, who's Conservative Councillor Wayne Fitzgerald. And basically in his administration as well. And there was a long and interesting debate in which Wayne Fitzgerald lost the motion of no confidence, and so he's no longer the leader. And then when they were appointing the new leader, so there was another motion to appoint a new leader, there was an amendment to that motion to reappoint Wayne Fitzgerald. So having had this long debate, which was quite passionate and, very partisan, they did the whole thing again, and it was just bizarre. It was bizarre. And they lost the lost that, obviously. And what's the name of the new leader of Peterborough City Council? I can just Google that.
Councillor Farouk, I think.
Yeah, Councillor Farouk, who was a former Conservative, wasn't he, who left the
Yeah,
party a few months ago. Did he join Peterborough First? Is that who it is? It's a group
yeah,
of
yeah.
independents, although they're not independents like I'm independents. Most of them are former Conservatives, which is fine, but they're kind of a more conservative branded group of independents who've got that history. There's some of my colleagues are former Conservatives as well. But yeah, it's really interesting to see the political direction of Peterborough change. I'm not particularly fond of Wayne Fitzgerald as a politician or a leader. I think he's treated the mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, Nick Johnson, really awfully. No matter what you say, politics isn't it shouldn't be about it should be a decent people should be nice to each other, and he's not been very nice at all. And I think he's been a rotten leader for Peterborough. I think that what we saw at the Combined Authority, he changed his mind on the what's the plan called, the local transport plan thing? I forget what it's called.
LTCP.
Yeah, and at the last minute, and almost kind of went against the wishes of his own group, against the wishes, or he told the chief executive he was going to vote one way and he didn't. So it was it was interesting.
And that felt like it was out of spite.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, it was a pretty poor show.
Yeah, it was.
So Dan is saying, did any of you eat popcorn while watching the Peterborough meeting? Which I did. Unfortunately, no. I was working in London that day, so actually I caught up with the whole live stream yesterday whilst I was cooking. But whilst some of my colleagues were watching and commenting live on Wednesday night, I was still on the train back.
All of them. I mean, there was literally hundreds. My phone was vibrating constantly when I was trying to present to ONS, because there was hundreds of messages of people people were basically eating popcorn and indulging in the experience.
Unfortunately, not that.
I have to say I didn't watch it. I haven't watched it. It is absolutely good that people are watching what's going on. It's just, but also I get why people tuned into this, because this is one of those sort of dramatic moments. I just wonder how you get more people to be aware of the sort of less dramatic meetings, but actually still, okay, maybe there aren't many as consequential as this, but budget setting meetings are pretty consequential. And I should think it's not often you get 1,400 people at those. I mean, it don't get me wrong, it is good that that people are coming, and you see the advantage of having the facility. you know, of people, whatchamacallit,
watching the meeting live. Yeah.
yeah, so thank you. I mean, and the people can, you know, can tune in remotely to see what's going on. The other thing is I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a stinking cold. I forget their name, but the BBC local democracy reporter was giving good coverage of it as well. So yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of live coverage as well for the event, and that's why like I felt very sad I couldn't watch it alongside all the colleagues on Wednesday. So I felt that I missed a bit, I missed out a bit. But then I watched it yesterday, and what I found really interesting, because I watched the full debate, was how different it seemed. Like even like how the debate went to like our county council meetings. So for two observations: first, the speeches. Most of the speeches were very short, because we have like 5 minutes in county. So
That's a good thing.
Were very short. And that's the first thing I was like, oh, people actually, stand up and speak for like 10, 20 seconds. And we're like, most of us usually use up to our 5 minutes in county. So I found really fascinating from like a meeting procedure thing, although like I think they have up to 3 minutes in most debates. But then also the other thing that really not surprised me, because I'm not surprised anymore in politics, but some of the conduct in the meeting, and some like, how, what Councillor Fitzgerald said in some speeches. Like there's a moment when he stood up and pointed at individual previous Conservative councillors who resigned from the Conservatives and joined Peter Borough, saying like he was like, I sacked you from cabinet, or like he did that or that. And I feel like in our council, of course, we have some fun moments as well, but I felt there was like we have less of that kind of personal politics, like a little bit. So yeah, but that's up to individuals and their style, I guess. But I found some of the conduct quite not necessarily unacceptable, but quite different, and yeah, not what I'm used to like in our meetings, in terms of I think we behave a bit better.
It's lots of that's down to the chair, though, isn't it? I mean, I think it was a really difficult meeting to chair because it was so passionate and there was so much at stake, I guess. But there was lots of interruptions. We have some interruptions at county council, but there's things like points of personal explanation, which aren't. I haven't seen Peterborough's constitution, but at Cambridgeshire County Council there aren't those things, and people were stopping to disagree with each other.
Yeah.
And that part of the debate was really poorly chaired, I thought, as well. I wouldn't have put up with it if I was the chair. That's all.
Well, it was difficult indeed. I mean, to be fair to the chair, it was very difficult because there were some speeches in which several councillors want to have a point of order, and then if you have a very short time as well, I think you have like about 3 minutes instead of 5, so then it's very difficult to continue your speech if you're interrupted 10 times. I mean, some of the speeches are worse than in the parliament debates, when it's like, oh yeah, I give way to so and so, and you don't end up making your point because you give way too many times. So it kind of felt like that.
They weren't real points of order, though, were they? They're points of explanation things. But again, not having seen Peterborough's constitution, maybe they're allowed to do that. About a county council, the chair would stop that.
I tell you what, it reminds me of university debating, competitive debating, where you can stand up and have a point of information, and the aim of that, I know you say it's they call it a point of personal explanation. People use that to try and disrupt the speaker. I think there should be very, very few occasions where people can speak more than once or disrupt the order of the debate. And on a point of order, I think the response should be right. And the rule in the Labour Party now is, if you raise a point of order, you have to identify which rule you think has been broken.
Yeah.
So it's point of order, so right, everything stops. Which rule do you think has been broken? And hopefully deal with it quickly. But
that's what we do at county council as well, every single time. Well, that's what I did. I was a very new chair, so I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was following the constitution explicitly. But Sebastian Kindersley, who's the new chair, does an excellent job of that as well. And with Sebastian, if you raise a false point of order, he's going to embarrass you with a little quip that will make you look silly usually as well. So that stops people doing it.
So moving on to the meeting. So like, well, like what happened. You can see it. It's like very well covered in the news. I think, we're wishing, the new administration well. And I have to say, like, of course, for Councillor Fitzgerald, although like I did watch the speeches and I thought like, some of what was said was very inappropriate, but like, at the same time, I thought it would be like a very difficult day for him, like when you're basically sacked from your job. So I hope he can be, he can work more in the spirit of cooperation, like later on after this kind of like high intensity debate passes. Although, like, I have to say, Stephen, I do agree with your points regarding how some of this behavior unfolded in the combined authority, and of course around the local transport and connectivity plan, when it felt it was like a very kind of personal decision to veto it rather than proper political debate in that sense. But that's like my personal view. But anyway, I hope that Peterborough will do well in the future.
But I think it goes to show that if you went back to 2016, you would have seen that Huntingdonshire was conservative. Peterborough, I think, was conservative in 2016. South Cambs was conservative. East Cam and Fenland are still conservative, and I think City was probably Liberal Democrat or maybe Labour. But since then, so South Cambs was the first to fall to Liberal Democrats. Huntingdonshire is the county council was also conservative back in those days. The county council has changed to a joint administration with Lib Dems, Labour, and Independents. Huntingdonshire has gone to a joint administration along similar lines with an extra Green person. Peterborough has now fallen as well, and East Cam just about hang on. So we've gone from being an almost entirely blue county to a blue in one corner county, which has been it's a really, really huge political shift in less than 10 years. I
mean, I agree with you entirely. The effect of having first three past the post in wards is very distorting, though. There shouldn't be, I don't think, a majority government in any of the council areas. They should all be coalitions.
Yeah,
based on share of vote.
Yeah, which is a good thing. I mean, my experience of having been in two of those, I think generally it's a good thing as well. I forgot to say that Nick Johnson also won the mayoral contest as well. So we've got a Labour mayor, which, when I first started in politics 5 years ago, I thought my upward progress as an independent town council was next to zero, and there's no chance of ever being in administration or even probably being elected anywhere else. And now the landscape has completely changed. But I agree with you, David. Actually, I'm not a massive fan of PR. Maybe we should talk about that somewhere else, because I'm an independent. And I think it would be quite difficult for independents to get elected without ganging up into groups, which I don't really like. But in terms of the way that local authorities are governed, I think coalition is an ideal way to do that as well, because it's about compromise and cooperation, which there should be more of in local politics and all politics.
So we should do next time, we should speak about electoral systems and first past the post and like how independents do in elections. So that's for the next time. But before that, because we have about like 10 or so minutes left until David has to go on the radio. So wishing him luck with the interview. I want to bring the second motion, because after this very difficult debate on the no confidence vote, and we all know the results now and all have our opinions of it, what really shocked me the most in that meeting was the second motion, actually. Which you can see on the Peterborough agenda from the 1st of November, which is the motion from Councillor Fenner, a Conservative councillor in Peterborough, which I do accept was submitted before the government announcements to close around 50 asylum hotels across the UK, including the one in Peterborough, but also others in our Cambridgeshire region and Peterborough, and of course, wider east of England. And the motion was, the text of the motion, you can see it for yourself. It is linked to the station quarter redevelopment, basically saying, in short, that having the asylum hotel there is not appropriate because you're redeveloping the station, so you shouldn't have the hotel there, and you got all this 48 million investment for the station quarter. But then it also asks, the motion asks to also lobby the government to find alternative accommodation, so for the men in said hotel, outside of Peterborough, and support. So it's asking the council to support the government, and I quote, in the campaign to stop the boats and illegal immigration. What I found fascinating about the debate is how the motion was proposed and opened, and how it refers to those illegal, as in I quote from the debate, not my language, illegal asylum seekers, and how quite a few councillors, and it was really good debate on that, including one of our colleagues, at least one of our colleagues. I meant Labour colleagues from the colleagues of myself and David in the party, Councillor Dennis Jones, who stood up and corrected some of the language and, actually setting the record straight in terms of why do we need this temporary accommodation, referring to the government asylum backlog, the mismanagement of the Home Office, and just putting some facts on the table rather than just the narrative around, there's this illegal migration and we don't want any of this in our town or city, but the government should find accommodation, but somewhere else, not here, not in our area. So I guess the question is, what do you think about this? Of course, this is linked to the wider debate that we had as well in Cambridgeshire around asylum hotels and the closure of 50 of those across the UK. David, what do you think about this? And I'll ask Stephen as well, especially that he's very informed about the topic as one of the portfolio holders of with a relevant portfolio to this issue locally. So David, first, what do you think?
I think there's a few things here. One is that the amount of misinformation around the whole topic is astronomical, and it comes to the point where I think some of it has to be deliberate. And I get the motives for the council to say this is an issue and so on. It came across as very NIMBY-ish and exploiting the issue rather than trying to find a solution for it. But the solution that the government seems to be coming up with is to effectively imprison people, a sort of disused barracks, the Bibby Stockholm, the infamous, and so on. And it gets to a point where I think this is just performative cruelty. I don't absolutely quote me on this, but I think I'm right. It would be cheaper to send someone on a year cruise with Disney than house them on the Bibby Stockholm. Which, and the Bibby Stockholm, it literally had Legionnaire's disease in it. You can't make this up. So it just seems like the whole policy is just designed to be cruel for the sake of being cruel and to appease people. Now, I know I'm going to come across as a bit of an arse on this, but I really do think there is a sort of lack of understanding of the issues here. Or similarly, we're going to Rwanda. We're back to transportation almost. And it's the moving people around from one set of accommodation to worse accommodation doesn't actually deal with the core issue here. I don't think. I know, Alex, vastly more about this than I do. Sorry, but the core issue is the processing times for asylum seekers, and I think that there's this isn't who we are, or this isn't who we should be as a country. People. Okay, I get it causes pressures. I get the way that it's been handled has caused real issues in particular local areas. Absolutely. But we have, I think, both legal and moral responsibilities to support people who are seeking asylum. And that does mean, we need to process people as they come in, but we should do that quickly and humanely. And I think doing it quickly is part of the humane bit. It's just really, I know, really kind of frustrating to see. And I just want to add one last thing, which people bring up from time to time, which is, why do asylum seekers come to the UK? Why don't they stop at countries on the route? The first thing is, most do. Most people who are refugees, for example, or are internally displaced persons within their state of origin or are in neighbouring states, and the countries of the European Union, which lie to the, mostly to the east and south of us, do take more asylum seekers per capita than the UK. But none of that matters. If we've said we've got an obligation which we've taken onto ourselves, that kind of doesn't matter. It says we should cooperate and do things sensibly. But also, it's like, why would people want to come here? Well, let's say everything went horribly wrong in the UK. The place it would make sense for me to go to have some safety and rebuild my life and whatever would probably be Australia, because that's where I've got family and I speak the language, and I sort of no, Australia wouldn't be the first country I come to. And it's this. It may be that I just go over the border to France. Sorry, I'm going on a rant now, but I feel kind of strong.
I think that's exactly right. That's how I'm trying to explain as well. So like, well, okay, I was born in Romania. If there was like a horrible situation in the UK, although I settled in the UK and I want to stay here permanently, and we all had to like consider fleeing the UK for whatever reason, of course, if Romania was still a peaceful country, I would go there because I speak the language and I have family there. Like I wouldn't just stop. I wouldn't just go to France because France is the first country that I happen to cross. When I cross it, of course, if I can't travel to Romania for whatever reason, then you would stop in there. But I think there's this issue of family connections, and wouldn't you want that? Wouldn't you want people in a place where they actually can integrate? Because Absolutely. It does matter if you speak the language already. It does matter if you have someone that a friend or a family member who can support you. You're more likely to find a job when you have the right to work. You're more likely to actually be integrated in community rather than you going to the first. And also, there's no such thing as it depends also on the reason for claiming asylum. Some people are persecuted because of their sexuality or their religion, and some countries are just not appropriate to seek asylum into if the reason for which you're persecuted would be the same reason you're persecuted in the other country which perhaps happens to be the first one on your route. So there are of course a lot of kind of technical and legal discussions on this. But ultimately, what really does upset me about this debate is that, okay, the government decides to close this, temporary accommodation solution, because it's always a temporary solution in around 50 places in the UK. And then still put people, because it's not like, everyone's claim will be processed, because they're still not investing in enough caseworkers and so on. Just move the people somewhere else, obviously with implications to their health, their mental health, and so on, and still implications to the taxpayer, because it still costs money to hold the barges and barracks, as well as the asylum hotels. Instead of thinking, okay, how can we process that quicker? The Home Office used to have a service standard of 6 months on applications, and that's some people are waiting for 1 to 3 years for their status, in which time they don't have the right to work. So how on earth are you supposed not to be, to quote the opposition, a burden on the taxpayer if I can't work and pay for myself? You're stuck in this cycle of waiting for, let's say, 2-3 years, and you can't work, and therefore you can't pay taxes, and therefore you can't pay for your own accommodation, and therefore you have to rely on whatever accommodation is provided by the state, central government funded, like the hotels, or indeed the problem falling on the district councils and them providing accommodation for you whilst you still don't have the right to work. So Stephen, here's where I think you come in. So what are the concerns locally, I guess?
Well, so just want to start off by saying I have a small amount of sympathy for Peterborough in general, because there's this whole principle called asylum seeker dispersal, which is supposed to be kind of a fairer distribution of asylum seekers. If you in terms of that, then Peterborough has a disproportionate number of asylum seekers, because it's a multicultural city, which there's lots of existing communities. You can so if you go and move, if you're an Afghani or a Syrian asylum seeker, being put in a village in the middle of rural Cambridgeshire means you're not going to get the support you get. So a disproportionate number of asylum seekers end up being housed in Peterborough, which is perhaps the nature of some of the political concerns with regard to getting people out of hotels. So I've been, portfolio holder for just over 1.5 years, and for most of that time, the government's been saying they want to close those hotels and they want to put people in houses of multiple occupation, which are kind of, flat type buildings, converted properties that have several flats inside a house. And in general, I support that idea, because I think part of the political problem with this is people think that living in a hotel is fantastic, but you've been inside at least one of these hotels, Alex, and it's not a very humane place to live, where you can't cook for yourself, you can't look after yourself as well. So getting people out of hotels into more appropriate accommodation, 100% support that, but that's got to be done in a sustainable and steady way. And what you can't do is, just for political reasons, just shut hotels because I guess the more that I'm going to say the Daily Mail reading public, which probably isn't very fair, perceive these places to be places of luxury because they're not as well. And so the real issue is that they're going to shut down these hotels. And they're going to try and put people into HMOs, which I kind of support no, it's not in HMOs. They're going to take them to places like prison ships and horrible accommodation areas and HMOs as well. And what's going to happen is there's not enough of those HMOs in certain communities, like in Huntingdonshire, and the ones that are used by existing, residents. Sometimes people on the edge of crisis as well. And so what's going to happen is that Serco is going to go into the community. They're going to generously pay the owners of those HMOs, who are almost always private landlords, to take in some asylum seekers. And what's going to happen is that regular people, the asylum seekers, are going to move into the hotels, and the regular people who live in those places normally are going to be displaced. Now, there's a massive shortage of temporary accommodation in the country, and especially in Huntingdonshire. It costs us a fortune to put people into temporary accommodation. And what we're going to have to see is there's not, we're going to push another new cohort of people into this limited supply of places, and regular people are going to get pushed out, which is going to, with it, more people are going to, more regular people or non-asylum seekers are going to end up in temporary accommodation in other sorts of hotels. It's going to probably cause more people to be forced into homelessness, and that whole piece I'm really, really worried about. So at District Council, I'm writing a formal letter to the Minister, which is probably Michael Gove, I think, to state our concerns about this as well, because I think downstream it's going to cost local councils lots of money. It's going to put people into crisis, and it's going to increase our homelessness. And for all of those reasons, I think this is a silly and completely knee-jerk way to handle this as well. These people deserve to be treated with humanity, and we just need to process more of them, not just shunt them from place to place, so they can get on with their lives, if they have their asylum application granted or not.
I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, the thing is, I do agree that this causes issues locally. It absolutely does. But the problem is people aren't able to integrate, are stuck there for and the root cause of this is the amount of time it takes to process people.
How long, Alex? Are people stuck in these places for?
It is very, very, so like, for example, when I visited one of the hotels we have in Cambridgeshire, I spoke to people who've been in several hotels before and in other accommodations who've been like over 1 year, like some of them over 2 years in the system. Their case, if you look at some of the migrant rights organizations, people who've been waiting for like 3 years plus for a decision. And it's something that I think is not known by general public. Until you have a decision, you can have a negative or a positive decision. If you have a negative decision, you can, of course, we have the right to appeal, but then, it opens another like very long process. But the majority of people get a positive decision. It is only when you have a positive decision on your application, you're like, okay, now you have, status like in law, that you have the right to work. So everyone who's like, oh, why do we have to spend this money and so on? Well, because there's no other way. Because if you can't like make money in any way, you can't therefore pay for yourself a private rent or be on the pathway to perhaps be supported by the council and then transition into private rent and like have a job that's enough to pay for your stuff. And that's exactly I think as David says, like the root cause is how the Home Office has been chaotic. Because you either have a system where the processing time is quick, so then you can argue, although I don't agree, you can argue, well, you don't have the right to work, but because we process everything in like a service standard of, let's say, 6 months maximum, then you can kind of justify this kind of temporary accommodation in the meantime, and then you kind of put people to pathway to employment. But you can't have a long time and without any kind of workers' rights. In Australia, for example, because we really love an Australian-style immigration system now with this government. But if you actually took that, took all their policies, in Australia, asylum seekers do have the right to work. I mean, there's a particular way they do it, but they actually can be paired with some employers and can actually exercise the right to work and can earn whilst they're waiting for this process to finish.
And while they're earning, they're paying taxes.
Exactly. So it does contribute. So I say to everyone who's concerned concerned about the contribution of migrants, although overall migrants do contribute more than take out, and I don't want to kind of narrow this idea of contribution in a pure economic sense, because it's not helpful. But if you really want that, I expect you to campaign on the right to work for asylum seekers, or at the very least on shorter processing times, because you can't have the 3-year or 2-year processing times for some people without the right to work and expect it not to cost a significant amount of money to the taxpayer, because it will, because there's no other way to do it, because you are entitled to make an application and wait for a decision. Of course, if the decision is negative, of course you can appeal it, but if it's ultimately negative, you will be subject to removal. But the reality is the majority of people do claim asylum because they're fleeing war, violence, and persecution. The majority will get their asylum claim accepted. So anyway, there's a lot to discuss on this topic. I know David has to run to the interview, so I don't want to hold it much longer. And I have to try the number 5 bus. The busway B, and then the number 5 to go to Bar Hill like this morning. So I will see how a new bus route works today.
I went to the bus depot yesterday, so I went to visit Whippet yesterday, which was really interesting as well.
What's the most interesting thing you found in one sentence?
Oh, the Whippet run bus services which go from kind of Liverpool to Paris as well, but from the bus depot in Swavesey, which is just outside St Ives as well. And so it's a much bigger operation. They've got lots of electric buses as well. So the Cambridgeshire service is run by Whippet, so they've got lots of brand new charges. So it was really interesting and a really nice kind of local bus company, which we should talk about some more another time.
And we should. But anything on why their service they've had so many issues in Huntingdon recently?
In general, it's because of what happened last year when they Stagecoach withdrew from loads of routes. Whippet came in with some funding from the Combined Authority to rescue them. But what you can't do overnight is suddenly expand your bus service to loads of routes. So what happens? So they had to buy loads of buses quickly on the aftermarket, second-hand buses, which were probably past their ideal usage date as well. So they've had some mechanical issues from those buses, which are mainly replaced. But also this Brexit thing is that there's not enough bus driver training facilities around. And so they can recruit bus drivers, but they have to keep their existing drivers trained as well. You have to be, trained at least once a year. They're not a big enough company to own their own training buses. And there's this backlog. And so instead of, if you wanted to quit your job tomorrow, David, and become a bus driver, which I would quite like to do if I wasn't such a rubbish driver, you should be able to do it inside a month. It takes about 6 weeks, we heard, to train a bus driver, but it's taking 3 months to get on the courses, and people don't want to make that leap as well. So those are the issues that can be resolved, I think. And I was very impressed. I mean, they're worried about every single bus service they cancel. They're embarrassed about and they're worried about. But I think things are getting better, and you can plot the progress. And I think they really care about buses. And so, and like visiting Stagecoach, people are passionate about buses, and it's really interesting to talk to them.
I'm going to have to, sorry, Alex.
Okay. No, I said I'm going to end it here. I said, hopefully things can get better. So next time we can discuss more about Whippet, electoral systems, although Dan in the comments disagrees with the topic. And we can go through some of the other comments around, actually an interesting comment around, should you trigger like a by-election if you're switching party as well, which is like an interesting one to debate. So we'll see you all next Friday at 7:30 a.m. Good luck with the interview, David. And
thank you.
Is it a bus driver interview?
No, it's not. Although I'm currently in Edinburgh, so I've got to get a bus from my hotel to Waverley Station, and then hopefully there'll be trains south. So we'll see what happens.
Well, good luck with the public transport today, and hello Hillary in the comments as well. See you all next week. Bye bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.